Welcome to the 12 Pound Podcast. I'm your co-host, Robert. Joining me, as always, is my mom, Bobbie. Hi, Mom.
Hi, Robert.
Hello. It's beautiful in Cape May.
I know the sun is finally out, shining. It's a gorgeous day.
Yeah, daffodils are out. It's a beautiful spring day. Well, as a quick reminder, the 12 Pound Podcast discusses life's changes and how we hope to help you face them through shared stories and experiences. It's nearly May, which means it's nearly your birthday, Mom.
Yes, my birthday, almost my birthday month.
How are you feeling about your 70s?
Not great. That aging gracefully stuff, it's bullshit.
Yeah.
It's a little warmer in Philadelphia, isn't it, than here?
It's always hotter in the city.
It's always hotter in Philadelphia, yeah.
It's tough life down here at the beach.
Oh, yeah.
That ocean
struggle.
breeze.
It's a struggle.
I can complain about that ocean breeze all day. Well, I'm really glad to be here with you again today, Mom. This is episode 25. So we are at a quarter of a century of episodes. So congratulations to us, because we're awesome. And here we are. Well, as our audience has come to learn, this podcast is predicated on change. And one of the biggest changes we go through in life is death. And getting older, losing loved ones, and managing through that process of grief is a change we all experience. And because death is difficult to talk about, it can mean that by the time we get there, we're pretty unprepared because we've done our best, unfortunately, to avoid the subject for the better part of our lives until it's upon us. So that had us thinking about end of life and asking, since there are so many people in the beginning of life who help us through this maze of childbirth and bringing a life into the world, why aren't there more people at the end to help us guide someone out? Specifically, Mom, we were talking about midwives and doulas. We used a midwife and doula for my youngest daughter, Josephine, and it was really a beautiful experience having somebody to take you through that maze of newness. You just didn't know anything about anything. And
I didn't know I was going to have a 12-pound baby.
No,
is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Who would have told you? 12 pounds of me. Well, and wouldn't you know it, serendipity stepped in. And following one of our recent episodes that we posted online, an End of Life Doula liked one of our podcasts. And wouldn't you know it, I immediately contacted her and asked her if she would join us on the show. And wouldn't you know it, she's here with us today. So I am very happy to introduce our guest today, Sherry Andersen. Hi, Sherry. Welcome to the 12 Pound Podcast.
Hello, Robert and Bobbie. Very nice to join you here.
Well, it is a pleasure to have you via the telephone. We are excited that you are almost our second furthest caller. We had someone in California who joined us, a professor at the University of San Diego, but we did clarify that you were in Nevada, not Nevada. You're in Nevada. So for all of our listeners on the East Coast who are visiting Las Vegas and Reno in the next 3 weeks, do not say Nevada.
Is that I think that's a song. You say Nevada, I say Nevada.
You say Nevada, Sherry says Nevada. You say Nevada, Sherry says Nevada. Nevada. Whatever.
I love it.
Right.
I love it.
We love that you're here. We've had an opportunity to speak already, and I'm very excited to introduce you to Mom. And we're really excited to learn about what you do and why you do it, because both of us have been through the experience of having people sick or losing a loved one, and I know you have as well. So being an end of life doula is a really interesting and kind of a beautiful job in a lot of ways, and we'd love for you to set the stage for us and our audience. What is an end of life doula, and what are the services that you provide?
Well, thank you, Robert and Bobbie, and I'm so grateful to be here because myself and the thousands of other doulas around the world, we're trying to educate everybody one by one. So as you've already stated, I am a certified end-of-life doula. I was certified by the International Doula Givers Association. That was founded in 2008, so it's been around for a while, by a woman who was an RN, both in end-of-life hospice and as a oncology nurse. And when hospice didn't have the funds to do a program for her, she took it to the library and started educating people for free. So that's how I got my certification. Now, I do want to state that this is not government regulated. It's not a government regulated profession. So, but the training through Suzanne was very vast and intense. It was a 3-month-long program, including exams and having, hours with the dying. So what is an end-of-life doula, right? What we do is we assist dying patients and their families at the end of their life. And that means helping them to navigate the end, because they can most often be very lost, but the family around them, the decisions, the paperwork, the details, it can be overwhelming. And if things are not planned out in advance, then they just kind of lose it. So it's really a good idea to have somebody help them navigate through this. For myself, how I got into this is that in my 20s, I did have somewhat of a fear of death, and I decided to overcome it by becoming a hospice volunteer. So I went through their training. At that point in time, I did a second training many years later, because in between I was raising children. But I took additional training to what they call sit vigil. So basically sitting with those who are dying, which is an additional a training that you need. I guess it's a good time for you to ask some questions.
Well, good. Well, you started with what brought you to end of life care. That's really interesting that you had a fear of death. What?
Yes.
Was that just something that was kind of in the back of your mind, or was it something specific that you experienced? Or?
No. It was just, I don't know where that came from, Robert. There wasn't an event that triggered it. It was just something that came up for me. So I thought, well, the best way to get over fear, to conquer it, is to look it, straight in the eye. And that's when I decided to do the training. I guess I have an innate calling for this anyhow. I've been doing it a lot for friends and family before I knew that there was actually a profession. So, no great story on why, just there was a fear there.
I have a question, Sherry.
Yes.
Because when I think about, I think Robert and I have talked about this, when I personally think about death, because it seems a lot would be fear-based. It's not so much the dying part. Do you have people that the fear is actually how? You said you were afraid of death. I often think I just was curious to you if that makes any sense, because you're kind of a professional at this. Is it kind of normal to think not afraid of okay, I'm going to die, okay, I'm okay with that. One of these days I'm going to die. It's the how I'm going to die. Was that any part of your fear?
No, not back then, but today sometimes I do think about it. Mm-hmm. I try and pick and choose. I'm going to manifest my own death in my sleep, right? But statistics show that dying is the greatest fear that people have over everything. And I think this is interesting. There's usually 3 things that people are concerned about at the end of life, and that can actually hold them on to living, is either they're waiting for somebody to come, basically to say goodbye to, or they're waiting for somebody to leave the room because they don't want to have that person in the room, or they're waiting for something in their life to be completed. And I think in answer to your question is that it's the incompletion of something in their life that is their biggest fear. Yeah. Not as much pain, because pain can be managed very, very well these days. There's really no reason for people to be in pain at the end of life with all that we have medically going.
It's interesting. The first 2 seem so like natural, in terms of just like natural biology, With
the first 2 reasons?
Yeah. Just
the second reason,
waiting for someone to come, waiting for family.
Do you mean that there's someone there that you don't want to share that experience with? Waiting for you said waiting for someone.
Yes. For instance, when my father was towards the end of his life, I was sitting vigil with him, and I had already been sitting there for a couple of days when I decided to go home and take a real short break, and that's when he decided to pass. And I think what that person is thinking is, I don't want them to go through the pain of seeing me pass, although it's not painful, but that's what they're thinking. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense to you?
Total, yeah.
Well, you alluded to something. One of the challenges, of death, of course, is for those of us who are survived by it, in the business of continuing to live. life keeps going and needs attending to. So how do you work with people who I guess one way to say is that need to pick up the pieces?
Well, we try to get a lot of things done in advance of. So when we're working with the patient, the person who is dying, we will do a revisit of their life if they're willing to go there with us. Right now, I have a 93-year-old patient, and when I visit him, we go through photo albums and from years and years ago, and he tells me stories. And this way, he gets to see that his life was worthwhile. He gets to see, yes, he had trials and tribulations, but he also had, great accomplishments. So that gives peace to the person that's dying. And if the person who's dying has peace, then generally the family will follow and also have peace because that's what they're witnessing as an example from the person that they're losing. Isn't it really hardest for those left behind? Those who've gone forward, are no longer in pain. And depending on what your beliefs are, quote, in a better place. But the pain is for all of us left behind because we're going to miss them, right?
Yeah.
So if we have things in order, if that person passing is peaceful and, the memories, we can help through the grieving process. With the memories, we can help with the celebration of life and make it joyous. Let's face it, when a child comes into this world, we have 9 months to prepare generally, and we do baby showers and we ready the room and we get the announcements made. Well, why should we not also have a joyous departure from this world? Because this is one thing we're all going to be doing. We're all born, we all die. Let's make it beautiful. And we can make it beautiful by being prepared. It's the preparation. And that's why we doulas want to educate the world that, if you're prepared, this could be a beautiful thing and an easier thing, a much easier transition.
I think that's wonderful, and it makes a lot of sense. I think that preparation, it's often said that grief it's not a problem to be solved, it's a problem to be lived through. So, being able to prepare yourself to live through that grief. I think it was Joan Didion in her memoir, The Year of Magical Thinking, which recorded the year after her husband's death. She had said that grief has no distance, that everyone who's experienced grief mentions this phenomenon of waves, going
Yes.
through these waves of grief. So we live near the ocean, so apologies for the metaphor. But
no, I love it. And it brings up something that a hospice person shared with me after my mother passed. And she passed, and I had 2 weeks of preparing for the celebration, which, is a busy activity. So you're not totally in the grieving portion yet. That happens after the 2 weeks, and then the floodgates open, and then at the strangest places I would just burst out crying. And so what I was told is there are things called SUGs, that's SUGS, sudden upsurge of grief, and they can happen at any time, at any place, forever. An example is that my mother, if she would fly in to see me in Reno, she would make a beeline to the ladies' room as soon as she got off the plane. So after she had passed and I was at the airport, I walked by the ladies' room and tears just came, So sudden upsurge of grief. Grief is forever. We don't ever really, it doesn't go away. It's just, it lessens. And so the best way, I think, going back to one of your other questions, is to have the memories and to focus on the good times.
Yeah. I just read too, speaking of grief, because a friend of mine used to say grief should be a 4-letter word. Grief to me just means that you love the person. It's just love.
Well said, Bobbie.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well said. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
It's
and that's why I say it's we're the ones that we're grieving for, not the ones, the departed ones.
Yeah, absolutely. When you're talking about those, what did you call them again?
Sugs.
Sugs.
it's not a cocktail.
Oh, jeez. You hate him. It really. I can't reach him across the table.
Mom's looking at your old cocktail book.
Ice, please.
Yeah, I'm going through the cocktail book. But that's funny. Those it's a feeling all to itself. That wave, those waves, and it's interesting that whether it's someone dying or losing someone in a or whatever that you're grieving, there are an awful lot of things to grieve. I don't think you get those same waves of enthusiasm. That particular feeling, it just seems to be specific to grief, at least my sugs.
Yeah. No, I could see
Well-
that. I mean, you're right. It's maybe the memories of the loss. They come at different times for different people. And then-
Maybe people feel them differently. I don't know. Because to me, it's a physical, it's that physical feeling. It's
I think that's what's so interesting about grief and, the process of dying and then grief is that, and I keep drawing parallels to doulas in the beginning of life. And you had mentioned this, Mom, that in the beginning of life, it's kind of a set, you kind of know what's going to, I mean, I shouldn't say you know exactly what's going to happen, but you kind of know what's going to happen at 6 weeks, 2 months, 6 months, 2 years old, 5 years old.
There's many books about it.
There's many books about
book after book.
I could get a book on each month of our life for the first 5, but the last 5 are so different for so many different people. Sherry, I'm just curious, how do you manage those differences? I read this great quote from another End of Life Doula who said that she came to the realization that she wasn't an expert in grief. She was an expert in her grief. So how do you think about those differences in how people process those emotions? It's universally, I would say, I guess it could be said that it's universally understood that grief is something that everyone experiences differently.
Yes.
So because it's so different, because the way that people leave this world is very different person by person, right?
Okay.
Person might have Parkinson's.
Right.
The next person has Alzheimer's. One of your family members may go very suddenly. So, there's that sudden end. But in the beginning of life, there's this kind of like set runway. We kind of know what's going to happen from the day you're born to you're 2 years old. But at the end, there's so many variations. So I was just curious how you manage as an end-of-life doula the variations in our ending, if you will.
Well, one giant capitalized word, listening, because that's really what the person needs, is to be heard, right? So you just listen to what they have to, I'm talking about the doula now listening to the grieving person, right? We're on the same track here.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's a skill. I mean, I will sit for 4 hours with my patient and mostly listen. I mean, I'll throw in things here and there to keep him going, but it's not easy. But there's a saying, to meet the patient or the family where they're at. And that's what we have to figure out. Where are they, and that's through listening. So does that kind of answer your question?
It does.
Absolutely, because they'll tell you. That's what you're saying. I mean, if you're listening, they'll tell you where they are. Yeah.
Exactly.
But they might not tell you in the first hour.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you just, so much patience is required, because you want to jump in there, especially if you're an Irish lassie that's kissed the Blarney Stone and likes to gab.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have no idea how many times, it's practice. Boy, is it practice. But listening, it's a skill, and that is key to find out where the person is, where are they? And like I said, the goal and the saying is to meet them where they're at, even though that you're never supposed to end a sentence with a preposition.
And were you speaking to my mother before this podcast?
I know. I'm a grammar freak.
Oh, me too, Bobbie, me too.
God help us. God help us, because it's a lost art.
Oh my God! Can you believe the newscasters?
I know.
I mean, me versus I, and
I could have. How about my favorite? My all-time favorite is I could have went.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of bad grammar out there, and I got it from my father. He was a grammarian, so that's I'm used to it now. It's over, right? Proper grammar's gone.
It's over. That's right.
A lost art. It's a lost art.
It is. It absolutely is. It's interesting when we were talking about, you were speaking about birth being, the beginning of life being a celebration.
Yes.
And then we were sort of segued into, books about everything, about babies, everything, from their first steps to when they, do this and when they do that. And my crazy brain just went to, where's the book about being 70? Like, no, it's like not
Bobby, is that because you have a birthday coming up?
No, I'm gonna be 71. So I guess it wouldn't be a bestseller. You know what I mean? Like people are racing to the bookstore going, I need to know what's going to happen in my 71st year.
There was a book about death with Maury. Are you familiar with that? It's an older book, but
is it Tuesdays with Maury?
Yes. That's the one.
Yeah, I have with Mitch Albom, Tuesdays with Maury. Yeah, Tuesdays with Maury. Yes,
that was a wonderful book.
It was. That was and he was visiting that Maury, right? Every Tuesday. It was kind of recording his last years.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it is interesting. That reminds me, I'm sorry, interrupting you, Bobbie.
No, I just said I don't think I've read it, but I've heard of it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because the nurse practitioner of the gentleman that I'm working with right now has asked his wife to allow me to record his stories because the nurse practitioner adores him and thinks he has the best sayings and the best, she really likes this family, So yeah, recording at End of Life is wonderful. It's wonderful. I had the idea, I think I mentioned this to Robert the first time we spoke about recording seniors' lives, and this was some time ago when video was the format. So video them talking so that when they had passed, their family would be able to see them and hear them, and capturing their life briefly, and also capturing what were your goals, what was your philosophy, how did it work out, and what message do you have to leave for your family. Yeah. And so recording is another whole profession that should be out there.
I'm also wondering when working with, this family versus that family, I would think like anything else, there are families that you get closer to, that, is there ever where it, you take that home with you, a family that you might get real, like you just said, she really liked this family. Like she really liked, because I'm sure there's some families that might not be quite as pleasant.
Right.
Right. Yeah. So I'm just wondering, with a family that might just be just kind of exceptional, and so, different, and you get really close. Do you find yourself taking that home?
I haven't yet, but I could see that definitely happening. And of course, there will be grieving. There's always grieving for us doulas as well. Yeah, I've fallen in love with this particular family, and but on the other hand, I think you have to have a calling for this profession. I'm constantly told, not many people can do this, and I believe that because, it's not a topic that we're educated on or that we even want to talk about. My own daughters don't want to talk about it. And so I think you kind of have to have, it's almost maybe innate that you're able to do this. And so again, it's looking at with gratitude, gratitude to have had the time with that patient that you've fallen in love with.
Yeah, that's a great example. And, I'm grateful that I always say I'm grateful for people that do things. I'm grateful for kindergarten teachers. I can't even imagine if I had to do that. And I'm grateful for people like you because it's not something that I think I would, I coach people, which is funny, which is also that when you were talking about listening is so important to listen to people. But, thank God there are people, like yourself that have this calling. So.
Well, we all have our strengths, don't we? We all have our gifts.
That we do.
And
well, Robert, I don't know. I'm not quite so sure about Rob.
I'm still working on it.
He's still,
I'm
maybe.
getting there. I'm getting there. I feel like I'm getting a little closer every day.
It's getting closer.
More conversations like this, the more I can learn, the better I feel. Sherry, I was curious. Have you worked with a family or have you experienced working with a family? You may typically confront death with religion or spirituality, but maybe that family is agnostic to those beliefs. So how do you think about how spirituality plays into the role?
Well, that's an excellent question, Robert. And we, through the training, have been taught that we can't really introduce that ourselves, and we don't want to put our beliefs on our patients or their families. So again, it's meet them where they are. And I've been talking to, again, I'm using the same family I'm currently with. I would say agnostic, maybe more than atheistic, but we do get into life conversations, and I do like for them to think a little bit about what's ahead that can be good. I've read lots and lots of books about near-death experiences and shared death experiences. Do you know what a shared death experience is?
No. Could you tell us?
Yes. Okay, so a near-death experience, somebody's heart is actually stopped, and they were pronounced dead for so many minutes, but then they came back to life. And there's a lot of stories out there, lots and lots of them. There's even an association that studies this. Well, a shared death is when you're in the room with the person that is passing, and this is getting a little far out there, maybe I didn't intend to go here, but they say that some people are met and greeted, that the dying person sees someone in the room or people that are coming to take them to their new, quote, home. So like, for instance, a spouse might be in the corner of the room that they can see. We can't see, but they can. But in a shared death experience, and again, these are written up scientifically and stuff like that, you might be in the room with them when they see that person and actually see it yourself as well. So I'm getting kind of away from our topic.
Wow.
And
No, it's not at all. No, I actually
it's
think it's in the same.
Yeah.
No, it's in, I think.
I
No.
am out here on the West Coast.
I used to say when I was living
Those crazy West Coast
I would say
people.
when I was living in Denver,
Right,
I said,
right,
the air's
right.
air's a little thinner up there.
But
Up in the mountains.
I've gotten so interested in the afterlife, and so I've just been reading tons of books and listening to webinars, and there's just so much out there.
How can you not? I mean, you're watching it, in motion. It's
right.
It makes a lot of sense. It was actually something that was, I'm nodding to Mom. That was her question. We were talking about that because. Go ahead. What were you gonna say?
I think what we were talking about, I had asked you. It seems as though now I can ask a professional. Is there a pattern to when somebody? Do you see a lot of similarities in the actual dying process? Like that. This is happening, and now this is happening, and this will probably happen. So you're guiding someone through. Obviously, I think you said that before. It can certainly be different, but basically, a 2-year-old does this, and this, and this. Basically, does a dying person? I know there's such a thing as the last breath, only because someone pointed it out to me. When my mother, I wouldn't have any idea that was happening. So is that something that's there's tons of similarity in death?
No.
Okay.
Linear came to mind. So what I thought of when you were asking the question is, let me see if I got this correctly from you. You're asking if there's like a linear passage, like these steps are going to happen, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or A, B, C, D, E.
Yes.
Is that what?
Yes.
Okay. So physically there can be, but not always. So different things, depending on what their illness is, can happen towards the end of life, physically. Yeah. Okay. So there is when the body stops working and breaking down, slowing down, there can be an accumulation of fluid, and sometimes that comes forward through the mouth, but not with everybody. And I'm using that example, which is not the most pleasant, but because that's the one that I experienced with my mother, and hospice had not prepared me for that. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to prepare people, and I think there's more written about it now too. And I think hospice does try to give out booklets about what you might see physically, the physical changes at the end of life, so mm-hmm. that you are prepared for that. So I think in answering your question, if I'm getting it right, is that it's not all the same. It's not like steps. There's not going to be a step 1, 2, 3, 4. You might have 1, 2, skip 4, Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. And it sounds as though, since you don't know possibly what's going to happen, so you were talking about the fluid, that it would be great to have somebody there say it's my loved one to tell me, because I would be like, what the hell's going on?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You got it. Yes.
Yeah.
Educate.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, in the training, they did take us through the top 10 diseases, the most common, you know, that people will go through and what to look for those particular signs. But since every disease is different, that they're going to manifest a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
But unlike hospice workers, doulas don't get involved in medical issues. Is that correct?
We are aware of medical issues. We do not give medication, but we know what to look for. So if their breathing becomes more labored, that's a sign that, you know, they may need additional morphine or one of the other medications. And then at that point, we can be the ears and eyes of hospice and say, you know, give a call to hospice and say, this is what's happening. You know, you might want to take a look at this, because hospice is so regulated. And now they're actually being purchased by a lot of large corporations that really don't have any health field background, you know.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, they want to make the money. But in any case, exactly. And there were so many not-for-profits in the beginning, hospices, but now most of them are for profit, as opposed to hospice. Hospice is being so regulated, their volunteers even cannot be there more than, I believe it's something like 2 to 4 hours a week per patient, but that's it. I can be there 24 hours if I want, you know, to hold their hand and take them through to the end. So time capitalized is the biggest difference between what we can do in hospice. And again, yeah, we are the holistic end. We're non-medical holistic. So we deal with the physical, the mental, the spiritual, the intellectual, but not the treating them medically, if that makes sense.
It does. That's helpful. And thanks for the clarification. We appreciate it. I'm just curious, are you involved, or have you thought about getting involved with medical aid and dying?
I understand it, the requirements, and we did study that through the training. How would you can't, my understanding is you have to do this alone when you take the medication at the end of life.
I don't know. I know that there are now 10 states that you have to, I don't know why I was reading about this a while ago. It used to just be Vermont that you could, I don't know assisted suicide, they used to call it. Mm-hmm. But,
yeah.
Okay. Right. But now there are 10 states. I think,
yes.
I'm not sure. I think Nevada is one of them. New Jersey,
no.
It's not. Okay. New Jersey definitely
is.
Not yet. Okay. New Jersey is,
yeah.
Washington, D.C. is, and Vermont is. And
Oregon.
Yeah. You need a doctor to say that you are critical, that you're dying.
Yeah. Yes, you need two, actually. Two doctors within the 6-month period, right. That you are towards the end. Right.
And then they can prescribe the medication needed to end your life.
Right, but only you can take it. Nobody can give it to you.
Yeah, that could be a problem, huh?
Right.
No, that could be a problem. I'm thinking of the movie I'm Still Alice. She was certainly hoping
know.
Yeah, she was certainly hoping she could do that for herself, but when the time came, the dementia, she was too far gone to know to do it.
Exactly. So they don't allow it at this point in time, people with Alzheimer's and dementia they don't qualify for MAID. It's called MAID, medical assisted.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, which is terrible.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. You would think if you're going to be given the medication to, they're saying it's okay. Here's the medicine. You can do it. That if someone is willing to do that, you would think they would be allowed to, wouldn't you? I would, but that's just my opinion. Just an opinion.
Right. Right.
But I'm sure people have very strong opinions about the subject.
I think the reason that they do have it so regulated, that it's 2 doctors and such a certain amount of time, and they even, my understanding is, double check with them right before the like a week or 2 before the date that they've set, and it's the patient that sets the date. But you don't want it abused. So, that's why it's probably heavily.
Good point.
Because you don't want just anybody to be able to say, oh, I'm done. I mean, they want them to be they're at the end of their life. They have to be at the end of their life physically to qualify for this.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Medical aid in dying. I think that's what it stands for.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
that's
And then
interesting.
there is another really, ugh, um, it's called VSED, voluntary stopping eating and drinking.
Hmm.
That's what the VSED is. And that you can do on your own. I mean, you don't need anybody's approval for that. But it does take, it can take 2 to 4 weeks, and it can be pretty painful.
Yeah, that
But
does not sound pleasant.
No.
yeah, yeah.
So
Lots
forget
of-
about that,
But-
Robert.
All
Don't
right,
even
hold
think
on.
more-
I'm just crossing VSED off
Rob,
the list.
Robert's crossing that off. How he's going to kill me.
Okay,
But
VSED.
more and more attention is
You're going to be like, where are the Ritz crackers?
How come there's no food in my
Yeah.
house?
How come the water's not running? Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it.
There is, more and more attention is coming to this topic, which is great because we need to address it. Once it's addressed, you can put it to bed and go on with your life and know that everything will be in place and fine for you at the end. That's my goal. But it's, again, serendipitously timing on this call because this week's People magazine, the April 10th issue, has an article on an end-of-life doula in Texas.
Mm.
So
Interesting. Well, I think it is out there. I mean, as you know, a lot of this, well, I shouldn't say a lot of this, but COVID, obviously, and the pandemic
Yes.
really spurred this interest in dying and how people die, because I think for the first time, for a lot of people, the news was very explicit in terms of showing us what was happening, particularly at homes and old age homes
Where they died alone.
and the images
Oh.
of watching people on the other side of the glass waving to their loved ones who
Yes.
weren't
Oh
able
my
to go
God.
in.
Horrible.
heart-wrenching.
Yeah, and there were a significant amount of deaths over that 18 to 24 month period. Numbers that we really just don't get talked about too often anymore. So I think with that, and then being complemented by this surge of home births, natural births, having doulas in the room with you, I think it just became this this intuitive, complementary discussion, kind of like how we thought about it. You're bookending your life with people who are thinking about the holistic side of how you come in and how you go. And in both ends of the books, it's pretty complicated and it's pretty bureaucratic and it can be pretty painful. So it makes a lot of sense that in the last, let's just say 3 years or so, that it's becoming more topical. And I know people like yourself and folks in the organizations that you work with and other organizations as well have been doing this for a long time. But we're equally happy to hear that there are people who can help with end-of-life planning, and we're very happy that you're one of them, Sherry. You are really wonderful. We appreciate you taking your time today to share your path to this profession and sharing your thoughts with us. It's been wonderful.
Well, it's been wonderful on my end too, Robert and Bobbie. I really appreciate your following up with me because, as I said, the goal is to get the word out there, and educate everybody so that we can all have peaceful passings.
Wonderful, wonderful. I've really enjoyed it, Sherry. Really enjoyed it. If I ever get out to Nevada.
Reno, yes. You said it right. Yes.
Oh,
you're
no, I'm good
welcome.
now. I've got it.
Yeah,
got it.
you're golden.
I've got
You're
it.
golden.
Yeah.
And Sherry, if you ever come out to the East Coast, we, as our audience knows, we record in Cape May, New Jersey. It is almost summertime, so you are welcome to visit us as well.
Thank you.
It was really a
Thank you.
pleasure. I know Mom agrees. We feel and certainly take more comfort knowing that people like you and others are available to us throughout our lives and as well as at the end. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Well, if you want to learn more about Sherry and her services, please visit her website, where you can find information at www.forpeacefulpassings.com. That's the number 4. And, of course, you can find this episode and all of our past episodes at www.12poundpodcast.com. You can also find us on Spotify, Apple, Google, or your favorite podcast platform. Mom, number 25, this was one of the more interesting ones, and I think one of the more informative ones for sure.
Definitely. Really enjoyed it. Very informative.
Informative. Tiv. That's a hard T on there.
You're Oh my
All right.
goodness.
Well, that's good. We'll end it with a laugh. We're gonna need. Is there like an end of parenting doula?
There you
It
go.
should just be
There
doulas
you
for
go.
everything. All right.